around the wood. Amen. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Y'all remember that switch? Help me, Holy Ghost. She would say something to me in the midst of it that made no sense. She would say, I heard it, this is going to hurt me worse than it's hurt. Can I tell you that life is that way? That sometimes it feels like God is challenging us beyond our ability to even receive it. But he says in this passage, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. The freedom fighter, Frederick Douglass, talked about the challenge of deliverance from slavery. And he simply said, where there is not a struggle, there is no progress. Ben Franklin, in all of his writings, it says, there are no gains without pains. We know it true that where there is no battle, there is no blessing. We know that being from the Midwest, that there is no crop, there is no fruit without the pain of planting. We know as a would-be, as a used to be, as an over-the-hill athlete, we've always been told where there is no guts, there's no glory. Those of us who serve in leadership are especially always being challenged to follow an agenda. That's not the question. The question is, whose agenda are you following? We are constantly challenged. We're challenged by the weather. We have to determine what the temperature is going to be before we can figure out even what it is we're going to wear. I have learned that when I am being challenged, that I realize that Christ is growing us by challenging us. There are too many saints who don't want trials and tribulation. But can I tell you, only storms can help you to appreciate the God who delivers us through the storm, challenging us to deny ourselves, to be more in Christ than we ever thought we could be, to take up one's cross. Oh yes, the challenge in service, deacons and trustees, the challenge, pastor and clergy, the challenge for us is to deny, to renounce ourselves fully in all respects, persevering to do so, doing so persistently and resolutely. Deny, the word deny, in its Greek word, which is about 14 letters long and 5 different syllables, is really a compound word, meaning to bid farewell, to reject, to refuse. And that we as followers of Christ need to heed this principle. And that we need to be able to say farewell to the past life. And that's why we are told, we take it for granted, we take it as if we're going to the closet, when we are to take off the old man and to put on a new. You know, again, going back to mama, I would be in a hurry. I'd be coming from the athletic field, and I would throw some water on my face, and then I would try to throw some cologne on, and she would always say, you can't put cologne over. And so many of us are trying to put cologne over our old life, because we've got one foot in the old and the other foot in the new. You can't do it, church. And you can't be finger popping all the time at night like you used to if you are a changed individual. I cannot suggest that we are our own worst enemy. Can I tell you, can I be so bold to tell you that so many of our calamities and our miseries are not the fault of God, but they're our fault because we've made poor decisions. We've turned to the sources that cannot bring us healing. They can give us perhaps temporary relief, but they cannot heal us of what ails us. Romans 8 and 12 and 14, the 12th verse of the NIV says, therefore, brothers and sisters, we have an obligation. That's why I like this version. We have an obligation, but it is not to the sinful nature. An obligation to live according. If you live according to the sinful nature, verse 13, you will die. But if the Spirit, by the Spirit, you put to death the misdeeds of the body, you will live. Verse 14, because those who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons and daughters of God. Well, if that went past you, let me try the Message Bible on you again. Same passage, Romans 8, 12 and 14 through 14. So don't you see that we don't owe this old do-it-yourself life one red cent? Verse 13, there's nothing in it for us, nothing at all. The best thing to do is to give it a decent burial and get on with your new life. God's Spirit beckons. There are things to do and places to go. Oh, I like that, church. What bothers me is a still Christian. And what I mean about that, never getting involved, but telling everybody else what they ought to do. Bothers me when I hear folk talk always about the them and the they. It bothers me when we don't talk about the we. How can we advance the program of God? It's not our program. And the sooner we learn it, the further God can take us. Because God doesn't deal with mess, y'all. He doesn't deal with mess. God does everything. How? Decent and in order. Well, there is a principle called progressive resistance. It's usually used in therapeutic operations. Somebody trying to rehabbing, trying to restore that which was broken or that muscle that was torn. And it's called progressive resistance. And I want to talk to you about that for a few moments. It is based on the theory that muscles, in order to grow, must be challenged. In order for them to grow, in order for the muscle to develop, that must be challenged with resistance in order for growth and improvement. Can I say to you folks that some folks are just happy right where they are. They've been that way. They are that way, and they shall be that way. But that's not what God expects of us in leadership. God is always stretching us, always raising the bar on us. Just because you got through last year, you got to get through this year, don't you? We understand it in every facet of our lives. We're not wearing the same things we wore in 1940, 1950, 60, 70, 80. We're not. Matter of fact, I don't know about you, but I can't even get in that stuff. But this progressive resistance does not happen overnight. And our growth, our development, our improvement, it happens incrementally. It happens progressively by taking on, deacons, trustees, taking on more weight to help your pastor fulfill the vision that God has given this house. By taking on and dealing with more weight that the process creates, strengthens one's ability to overcome the resistance of the weight that sometimes may get heavy when you're going to the gym. And if you think about lifting a heavy weight, you might not be able to do it at first. You might have to drop down to a lower weight. But then if you keep at it, pretty soon you'll be able to lift more weight than you ever thought. This is the challenge of progressive resistance. The weight or whatever is standing in your way towards the goal of carrying the weight of leadership. Can I tell you that I believe that God has always attended this pastoral and church leadership as a team event. Oh, he has set up the structure. He's given us pastors. But if it were not for Aaron and her, I wonder if the victory would have ever been won. Or clearly, Moses was sitting on a rock. But every time they helped him hold up the banner, the victory was on its way. This is teamwork, folks. This is teamwork. But grasping the gravity of responsibility, the call to service is a sanctified entity. You just don't get somebody off the street. That's why it takes leadership training. That's why it takes instruction. That's why you got to spend some time in the Holy Writ. That's why you've got to draw closer. Can I tell you that I suspect that in our churches all across the country, if we really got to know God, I talked about earlier friendship and acquaintances, but if we ever really got to know him, I mean know him, know that it was him that woke you up this morning. Know that it was him who got you out of that sick bed. Know that it was him that has created everything in your life. That you haven't done one thing that the Lord hasn't allowed you to do. I'm talking about a sanctified man. I'm talking about understanding that you have been set apart to do his bidding. Understanding that the Christ has set us aside to do his work. Well, in discussing this progressive resistance, the opposite is also true. Because without this resistance or the challenge, physical muscles atrophy, a decline in efficacy, in our effectiveness. What occurs out of that is neglect. We degrade our ability to witness. We're weakened. That's why if you miss one Sunday and then you miss another Sunday, it gets easier. Pretty soon you say, well, I wonder how they doing. Somebody told me Messiah is doing pretty good, but I haven't been with him for a while. And therefore your spirituality degrades. You're not strong. You don't know. You've even forgotten how to pray. You know some folk in the church like that. I say all the time, every person in the church is not necessarily saved. Because you do have some saints and you got some ain'ts. So it makes sense that this progressive resistance would operate the same way in every facet of our lives. And that's why that's why we must be challenged. We must have this positive, progressive resistance. We must be confronted sometimes, even jolted out of our complacency. Talking about the election, it's shameful that 46.9% of the eligible voters did not vote. We have folk in our community talking about, I'm not going to vote because I don't like either candidate. How you like me now? Complacency, apathy, these are cancerous to the body of Christ. How can you be apathetic? How can you be complacent when he who woke you up this morning put food on your table, the very clothes you're wearing, the job you have, and even if you don't have a job, you're still breathing. You still seeing, you're hearing, you're seeing in Technicolor, hearing in stereo. Don't tell me my God is not good. Even when I've been down, he's covered me. Challenged, not just physically, but intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally. Yes, while a challenge, I've learned that there are some challenges. I want to give you this, that there are some challenges not worth my time. Some challenges, deacons, trustees, members, there are some challenges.